Well, welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So today it's a new cold list of CGC 9.8 comics at fair prices, because I do think a much more savvy way to collect is just to think independently about some key issues in the 9.8 you might want, and then go out and buy them for a fair price, rather than, you know, this show was just announced, now I gotta go buy that comic, or this movie's really popular, now I gotta go buy that comic. And you know, chasing those hot books, I think, is a pretty quick recipe to just kind of overpay for most of your comics, I think. Especially in the CGC 9.8, I find. Like, you know, maybe on a hot comic book, you get lucky and you find a deal in the back bin at your local comic shop or something. That's pretty great. But for specifically CGC 9.8 comic books, once there's like an announcement or a promo, like immediately 5 or 10 pop up on eBay for super overpriced. So I think the kind of cold comic book strategy is even more important with CGC 9.8 comic books. Okay, but that being said, I do have a full list here of 10 cold CGC 9.8 comics to consider at great fair prices here. Alright, first one we'll start off with is a really memorable 90s book. Yeah, it's a Ghost Rider number 15 in the CGC 9.8. This one's from 1991. And yeah, this cover's so memorable, and you know, even myself, I wasn't the biggest Ghost Rider fan when I got into comic books in the 90s, but I still remember this cover. Like, just this glow-in-the-dark, yeah, it's the glow-in-the-dark, classic Ghost Rider glow-in-the-dark cover. So it has become really collectible over time, and I think at the price in the 9.8, like if this one's really nostalgic for you, this is one to go after, I think, for sure, in the CGC 9.8. It's a really cool collector item. So there's 460 9.8s in the blue label. That's, you know, quite a bit. This is an early 90s book, so you almost expect quite a few there. 78.4% the CGC 9.8 ratio, so not too rare in the 9.8. That's probably why there, you know, seems to be quite a bit for this book, basically being like a non-key issue, just, you know, a memorable one, but it's not really a key. Yeah, so of all graded copies, 78.4% of them are CGC 9.8s. Not very rare in the 9.8, but that keeps the price really low. I saw an auction on this one go for $60 even on eBay. Yeah, just in the last couple days here, I'm pretty sure it ended too. So this is a good idea of what you can expect to get this book at. $60 if you like this cover, if you remember this one, and it's, again, me being not the biggest Ghost Rider fan, it's still kind of tempting for me, just because you do remember this one from the 90s, and it is a really great cover to look at, I think, too. One thing to consider, possibly, certainly the first print's really cheap. There's the second print that's a little more rare on the census. Much more rare, I think, too, and the 9.8 ratio percentage is sort of, I think it's like 50-ish%. So lower the better. It's more rare in the 9.8. Might want to consider that second print if you're just the hugest fan of this one, because I think that one is probably the best collector item you can get for a Ghost Rider number 15. But for 60 bucks in the 9.8, one to consider if you remember this one, or even if you just feel like you want this one. That's not a lot of money for a pretty cool collector item. Yeah, Ghost Rider 15 from 1991 in the CGC 9.8. Okay, next one is, you know, we'll have to debate. Maybe it's not a cold comic book, but I do want to talk here about Amazing Spider-Man number 301. Yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 301 in the 9.8 is a really special 9.8 comic book. Yeah, it's really relatively rare in the CGC 9.8 for a late 80s book. Yeah, somehow it was just like Amazing Spider-Man 300 and 301, just really hard to find in the high grade. Yeah, very, very high grade. And I think that's got a lot to do with the popularity, and they were traded so much back then, so a little bit of that. But Amazing Spider-Man 301, given where 300 has gone, you know, really heating up, moving into the Venom 2 movie next year. Most of those selling for over 4,000 in the CGC 9.8. Amazing Spider-Man 301's equally as rare as 300 almost in the 9.8, but hasn't really run up in price. So I think it is kind of one to consider right now that you can get for a fair price. We'll look on the census. 165 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So, you know, certainly there's over 1,000 of Amazing Spider-Man 300, and that kind of just goes down to the popularity of each one. Clearly, the first full appearance of Venom and the classic cover on 300 is going to get more 9.8s out there. But something to focus on for Amazing Spider-Man 301, 6.1% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. Yeah, nice low single digit 9.8 ratio in the late 80s, which makes it even better as well. Certainly Amazing Spider-Man 300 has the same kind of look on the census. It's even a little bit lower, a little bit more rare, Amazing Spider-Man 300, but this one still really sticks out for late 80s CGC 9.8. There was an auction for this one in the 9.8 white pages, just in the last little bit here that ended for $1,300. Now, this one kind of dipped under 1,000 there about 6 to 12 months ago. And I sort of felt that Amazing Spider-Man was heating up at that time as well. There was like the Let There Be Carnage announcement and things like that. And I thought this one was a really good buy then, around 1,000. And it hasn't appreciated that much for just how, I think, rare and collectible this book is. So, you know, the thing with Amazing Spider-Man 301, I personally kind of wanted this one. I had, at that point, had one Amazing Spider-Man 300 in the CGC 9.8. So, instead of buying this one, I ended up putting that money toward another Amazing Spider-Man 300 in the CGC 9.8. And I think the only issue with this one is it's really expensive. Like, it's just so rare and expensive. You know, you'd almost like this one maybe not to be as rare in the 9.8, because then you could maybe pick it up for like 500 bucks or something. But because it's so rare, it is a really good collector item. I did decide to get the other 300, and I don't regret that, really. But this one might be one to consider for sure. Certainly, maybe if you're maybe not the biggest Venom fan, this is when kind of classic Spidey comes back and you get the cover. So just a great collector item, I think, to consider. Hopefully around 1,300. I think in the 9.8 is a decent buy right now for how rare this one is. Yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 301 is one to consider. It's expensive, but I think it still kind of fits on a cold list. Okay, next one here is an interesting one that is a really affordable one, and yeah, I know I've considered this one for sure. It's a Batman Arkham Knight Genesis. I want to talk about the Jim Lee variant. Yeah, it's the Lee variant cover on the census, I believe. But Batman Arkham Knight Genesis is, you know, just a spin-off of the Arkham Knight series, but I think this Jim Lee cover, he just nailed it. This is one of the most eye-appealing Jim Lee Batman covers. Even better than, you know, maybe like there's the Batman 608 second print. That's like the classic Batman Jim Lee cover. Like this one even rivals that in some sort of eye appeal as well. And it's way more affordable than that cover as well, that second print one being not very well printed and is really expensive in the 9.8. So yeah, this one I think is just a great alternative for Batman fans out there, if you're a Jim Lee fan too. 54 9.8s in the blue label. There's a lot of these in the high grade available in the raw too, so this is just not that much of a popular one. I wouldn't really look into the rarity on the census too much in the 9.8. 84.4% the CGC 9.8 ratio. So interesting with this one. This kind of caught my eye because there's one on eBay right now for $50 in a kind of a buy it now, and the seller has like 10 in stock or something like that. And there's already been like 3 or 4 that have sold, I believe. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he's had this listing up for quite a while. I've noticed it off and on, and I'm really tempted right around the $50 just to get a perfect copy of this awesome Jim Lee Batman cover. But this could be right up your alley right now if this fits into your budget, if you're a big Jim Lee fan and Batman fan like I am, because yeah, this one's really tempted me. This one is kind of on eBay right now to buy if you're right into it. But yeah, Batman Arkham Knight Genesis, this Jim Lee variant cover, is to me one of the best Jim Lee covers, Jim Lee Batman covers out there. And at $50 in the 9.8, it makes a lot of sense. All right, we'll get into the next one here. It's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 95 cover A. Yeah, I brought mine out here. I do like a couple of the variants, and I do talk about some of the variants quite often. I think they're probably a little bit more collectible. But this one, I think, is, you know, staying certainly affordable, and I think we're past the sort of Jennika limited series that came out that was sort of stirring up some demand and promo for Jennika. But so I think now, you know, not a lot of people are talking about Jennika too much. And I think you can get in there and grab, you know, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 95 in the cover A for a decent price right now. So have a look on the census. We'll get into prices in a sec. 348 9.8s in the blue label. So there's quite a few of these out there. This is the most affordable version of it. There's that Eastman variant with the white cover. I got that one in the 9.8 too. That's probably That's maybe about 25 or 30 bucks more in the 9.8, but that one is one to consider, I think. But for this cover A, kind of the coldest of the bunch, I would imagine. 340 in the 9.8, 84.9%, the CGC 9.8 ratio. This is a new modern, so just coming out a couple years ago. It's not going to be a super rare one in the 9.8. So some completed listings on eBay right now, right around 125 bucks. Most of these seem to be selling for. I did see one sell for 150. Yeah, I think that's kind of the range. I think if you even wait for an auction on this one, you get it close to 100 bucks basically. Yeah, I bought one of mine for 100 and one of mine was like 132.99 or something. I remember I kind of got a little excited and overpaid for one of them. I got two of these in the 9.8. But yeah, in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 95, yeah, Jennika becomes the new Ninja Turtle, the fifth member of kind of, yeah, the Ninja Turtles. I think, yeah, for a modern book, I think that's a big kind of classic addition to, an iconic superhero team, or if you want to call them that, a superhero team. The Ninja Turtles that have always had 4 members, right? So this big addition of a 5th member, I think, is a really cool modern to focus on. Certainly there's variants that will fit your budget if you want to look into, we've talked about a couple of them, the SDCC variant and the Eastman variant I just touched on. But TMNT 95, hopefully around 100 up to 125 with the cover A, I think is just a great buy. Getting Jennika becoming the 5th member of the Ninja Turtles in this one. Okay, next one's a pretty cool one that I think it definitely fits on a cold list. It's an Amazing Spider-Man number 529. Yeah, this is the first Spider-Man costume. First appearance of the new Spider-Man costume, the Iron Spider costume kind of thing. Yeah, I think with this one, it definitely fits on a cold list because, when the Iron Spider costume kind of got on the Avengers movies at first, this book really exploded. Like, I think these were kind of around 200, like maybe even a little bit more. And, during that promo, I don't really like to buy comics that have all the hype and promo. So, certainly years later now, this one has cooled down. Even 6 to 12 months ago, this one was like, you'd see some under $100, and it was even, pretty tempting to me for a bit of an underfollowed Spider-Man key. But, yeah, now I think, the prices have maybe come back a little bit with the market, but it's still really affordable. So there's 1,199 of them in the CGC 9.8. That's quite a lot, and I think a lot of that has to do with that rush that came when the Iron Spider costume kind of found its way on the big screen. 65.2%, so over half of them are 9.8. It's not a super rare 9.8. It's a modern though, so not too bad. So some completed sales for Amazing Spider-Man 529, right around $160. I think a couple of them have went a few over that too. Yeah, pretty surprised to see this one sort of approaching 100. I think one sold for $189.99. But I am sort of, I would aim, right around 160, I think is fair, maybe even a little bit lower. Because I do remember this one lulling 6 to 12 months ago. It was a really good cold one back then. And it was right around $100. I'm pretty sure you could have got this one maybe even for like 90 bucks in an auction. With 1,199 of them, every now and then this one will pop up in an auction and you can get it for pretty cheap, I think. So this one fits on a cold list. Certainly it was like 200 or more even, right around that peak hype when it was in the movie. So just a cool, kind of a secondary Amazing Spider-Man key. And I always love Amazing Spider-Man keys. They're just so collectible and easy to sell too because they're so collectible. So a lot of positives about this one. And I think right around 150, let's call it, is a great buy for an Amazing Spider-Man 529. All right, the next pair here is some interesting 90s books. Maybe getting in the 90s mood from doing my last video there. But another one that probably would have fit on that video I got is Danger Girl #1 here. Yeah, this is a cool J. Scott Campbell cover from the 90s. Yeah, this is... J. Scott Campbell was just way ahead of his time in the 90s, drawing all these, sexy ladies and stuff like that. And yeah, Gen 13 and Danger Girl, certainly a part of his repertoire in the 90s. This one's kind of cool around the price. We'll look on the census, 110 CGC 9.8. Yeah, these are books that I just remember seeing a lot, and they seemed, when I was collecting, when I was like, 12 years old or something, they seemed like they were hard to find. Like Danger Girl #1 was just like, and Gen 13, like they're hard to find. But now they're pretty easy to get and super affordable in the 9.8. So these are kind of, just on a pure nostalgic level, are kind of attracting me, even though I've never read a Danger Girl comic. I never read it back then when I was younger. 110 9.8s, that's pretty, not a lot of them, that's kind of cool. 56.4%, the CGC 9.8 ratio. So of all graded copies, 56.4% of them are 9.8s, which is not too much to write home about at all. But this one saw one sell for $100. Yeah, $100 even. I think, even if you wait in an auction for this one, which admittedly would kind of be hard, there's only 110 of them out there, but you'd probably get this one for like 70 or 80. I just don't think there's a lot of people searching for this one that much. But even around $100, especially if you like Danger Girl, but even if you don't, this is just one of those super nostalgic ones from when I was collecting comic books in the kind of late 90s there. So it might be one to consider that you can get for a cold price, for sure. Next one is, I think, even a bit more of a possible of an investment grade book. It's a Witchblade number 10 I want to talk about. Yeah, this is the first appearance of the Darkness. Yeah, and his, I didn't write down his name. I forget his name there, but yeah, it was kind of like a Spanish name. But it's the Darkness's first appearance in Witchblade number 10. Similar, I had a couple Darkness books, but I never really read them too intensely when I was collecting in the 90s or anything like that. But always just felt like they were hard to find and really expensive. So even this one just kind of, first Darkness, cool Witchblade cover, is kind of tempting me. And interesting with the prices, we'll talk in a sec. But 83 9.8s for this one. So a 1 of 83 for first Darkness. Kind of for 90s, for like late 90s nostalgia, almost doesn't get better than that. 47.4%, the 9.8 ratio. So yeah, just under half of them are 9.8s, not too bad. So interesting with Witchblade number 10. There's one online right now. I think it's like $225. I forget if it was a best offer or not. However, I did see one sell for $100. So yeah, I think occasionally, because there's only 83 of these out there, you'll try to see people wanting to get a lot more for like the biggest Darkness or Witchblade fans out there. But you can get this one for $100. I think right around 100, maybe even 125 or something if it just looked perfect in a new case. A Witchblade number 10. First Darkness is a cool one for the price, and just again, yeah, never really got into these stories in the 90s, but just so memorable and nostalgic for me that around $100, these last two are kind of making a lot of sense. Okay, the next one's a really interesting one in the 9.8 that I had not realized was so rare in the 9.8 specifically. It's a Ultimate Spider-Man number 1. So this is the first Ultimate titled book out there, yeah, and certainly given how, Miles Morales has taken off with the whole Ultimate Spider-Man storyline, this is kind of cool to get the first Ultimate in a title. So definitely a key issue for this one, Ultimate Spider-Man number 1. From 2000, there's 407 9.8s in the blue label, but what really caught my eye is, of all graded copies, 14.1% of them are 9.8s. That is really nice and low for a, this is a 2000, came out in the year 2000. That's really nice and low for this era of book. Of all graded copies, only 14.1% of them are 9.8, so nice relative rarity in the 9.8. So this one's really kind of coming into focus for me just because of that. Like, this is one of the better sort of low ratio, low priced books out there, I think. That is still a key, and it's the first Ultimate title. There was quite a few on eBay right now that I think the cheapest one was like $275. But this one, so there's not really any fair ones on eBay, unfortunately, right now. But for Ultimate Spider-Man 1, in the first print, there's a couple other variants and things like that, but we'll just talk about the first print with the red kind of border. $177.50 I saw in auction, and in that I think this book's totally worth it at that price. Yeah, $175, we'll call it like just a great fair price for this book that is pretty rare in the 9.8, and it's a key issue, first Ultimate title. Yeah, this is one where I sort of looked at it on the census and looked at was doing some of the research for the video, and I went on eBay and I'm like, if there's one, for around $175, I might just buy it. But there wasn't. I think the lowest priced one was $275 that I was seeing anyway. He certainly double checked that. But right around $175, this book with a really rare 9.8 first Ultimate title is a great buy, and certainly fits on the cold list, I think, as well. Okay, next one's a real classic, I think, that's so collectible. It's Marvel Tales number 137. I do have one of these here. Marvel Tales 137 is a reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15. Yeah, and I'm not into these reprints or facsimiles too much, but I do have 2 facsimiles, and they're both Amazing Fantasy 15s. I bought those just at the comic shop when they first came out. Just kind of a bit of an impulse purchase. But I'm not too into facsimiles at all. But if there's one that you're going to get, probably the first appearance of Spider-Man would be a pretty cool one to get. So I really think Marvel Tales 137 is a great collector item to have. I feel like it's good to just have them in the boxes. These iconic pages of the first appearance of Spider-Man. Because, yeah, clearly you can't really afford it personally in the, in a decent grade, the actual book. So this one makes a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense for me kind of at the price. We'll get into prices in a sec. But there's only 45 of these in the blue label. Yeah, this is an early 80s book, but, yeah, only 45 of them. You'd think thered be more, so I actually think it's probably a pretty rare one, all things considered, in the really, really high grade. So I want a 45 though of a great reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15 is a pretty great collector item, I think, in the 9.8. I actually like my retro label here. I got it's kind of yeah, it's an old label, and there's like they don't even have the artist or anything on it, just a blank label, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so Marvel Tales 137, 9.8 ratio, 31.3%. So decent. It's early 80s, so you'd like to see that a little bit lower, but there's not a lot of these graded, so it's more about that. So I was kind of surprised looking on eBay completed listing searches. There were like 4 or 5 of these that had sold. I was like, wow. I didn't really expect that, but most of them selling like right around I think 2 of them were like 144, 145. Right in that level, and then I saw one sell for 190 as well. So yeah, I do think this one is really collectible. It's under 200 still, and yeah, certainly right now it's not hot for any reason or another. So I think this is one that at any point in time to have a reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15, the classic origin story, first appearance of Spider-Man, is just cool to have in the collection, and hopefully you get it for closer to that kind of 145-ish level. I think, for what this book offers from kind of a pride of ownership, just having the story in your collection, I think is totally worth, right around 145 in the CGC 9.8. Okay, last one here, 10th on the list. All right, I want to talk about a Star Wars number 23. So certainly, like, a lot of the modern Star Wars comic books are really hot, so I was thinking, like, put a Star Wars comic on that you could still that's a really cool collector item that you could still kind of buy at a normal price, I would say. Because I don't think Darth Vader books have heated up too much. Yeah, a lot of the focus is really on these Clone Wars and Rebels characters, and then the modern Dark Horse books, I think. And Boba Fett, Star Wars 42, certainly. But Star Wars 23, if you didn't know, it's a great Darth Vader cover, certainly classic Darth Vader cover. The issue that's more well known is Star Wars 21, which is the first solo kind of Darth Vader story. However, in the 9.8, that one is not as rare. The 9.8 ratio is not as rare, so this one's tougher to find in the 9.8. And I've noticed this one's just, really well hunted by Darth Vader collectors, and I'm one of them. So, yeah, it's really this book and it's Star Wars Annual number 3, I think it is, are really the 2 Darth Vader covers that are pretty rare in the 9.8. So yeah, Star Wars 23, even though it is a rare 9.8, you can still kind of get it for a good price if you can find it. That's the issue. There's 33 9.8s in the blue label. There was one, I don't know if it's on eBay still, but it was like $225 or $250, and I was watching it, but I think that's a little bit too expensive for this one. We'll get into some auctions that I've saw this one end in before. But the 9.8 ratio, 18.9% of all graded blue copies are CGC 9.8s. So that is, under 20%. That's a pretty nice rare ratio for a Star Wars book like this. It's more rare than the Star Wars 21. That's maybe more of a key, maybe in the raw it might be more of a key, but in the 9.8, this one is more expensive than 21, I've noticed in the past. And if we do look at some completed listing, I actually wasn't seeing any here, but this is one that I've sort of wanted. Yeah, I've wanted this one. I don't have it in the 9.8. So I always kind of watch this one and take note of some auctions and things like that. And right around $150 is usually where the auctions end. So that's going to be like the rock bottom price on this one. And again, with that one listing going up to $225, it might have sold. I didn't see it on the completed listings, but it might have sold quite a long time ago. I'm not sure, but under $200, I think in this one, is a really cool 9.8 to consider. Yeah, and I think with only 33 of them out there, under $200 is looking pretty great, with like a lot of these modern Star Wars 9.8s going for really expensive. You know, being that a lot of people are just speculating that they're going to be the next character that's going to show up in all these Disney Star Wars movies, since Mandalorian's doing so good. So it's almost, you know, pretty, I can understand why people are speculating on new Star Wars comics. But this one, an older one, if you're a Darth Vader fan, you can still get this really great collector item. Hopefully, you know, be patient. You can get it around $150 for Star Wars 23 in the CGC 9.8. I think is a great cold buy right now. Okay, that'll be all for the list here. I'll have all 10 in the description below. And yeah, but with the cold list, as I said, I do think this type of collecting is a more savvy way to collect. You just don't want to be the guy or the lady chasing the hot comic books all the time. You're almost guaranteed to continually overpay if you know, really are following those hot videos and going out and buying those comics. If you check the prices a year later, you'll probably realize that you've overpaid most of the time. So, especially with CGC 9.8 comic books, as I said in the beginning. So, yeah, it's all magnified. But, thanks so much for watching, though. Yeah, really appreciate all the support from the team. If you haven't already, I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Yeah, I'd love to have you on our comic book collecting and comic book investing team. Hit the bell for all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter, too. All the links in the description below. But, yeah, some good ideas in this list, I think. Yeah, I was downright wanting a few of these. Yeah, I think some of those late 90s Image ones, and then the Ultimate Spider-Man #1 is kind of the real big standout, I think, from this list. Just how rare it is in the 9.8. I didn't realize that book was so rare, with the 14.1%, 9.8 percentage for a year 2000 book. Yeah, that's a really rare 9.8. So yeah, glad I kind of learned something, and yeah, hopefully got some ideas as well. But thanks so much for watching, as always. Really appreciate all the support from the team. And message me on Instagram if you did have any questions about whatever it might be. Thanks again, though, and I will see you on the next one.